Hello, everybody. It's Christopher Watson here with Empowered PAs, and today I have our guest, Kristin Burton. She's a PA, and she also has her own business where she coaches other PAs and other professionals on finances, getting out of debt, and other goals, financial goals that they have. So, Kristin, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, how long have you been practicing as a PA now?
It was 5 years this summer, so I guess right around 5.5 years.
Wow, so you've done a lot in 5 years after graduating. Were you doing anything prior to PA school, or is it kind of you went to undergrad and straight to PA school and out to practicing?
No, I did the straight undergrad to PA school path. I did my, healthcare hours, so to speak, in undergrad as a CNA in a memory care facility. But outside of that, I had no experience in the medical field whatsoever.
So what kind of turned you on to becoming a PA?
I actually started undergrad as pre-med, and then I had a counselor in college who had, we were sitting down talking, and I had said, I'm not really sold on medical school. I'm considering dental school, optometry, PA school, pharmacy school. I'm not really sure where to head. And their advice was essentially physicians work more hours, PAs work less. You should do that, which turns out to be not true at all.
Not true at all. I
Not true
I
at all.
hate when people say that.
Yep. But it's funny. We take advice, like there's no way one human being could advise on every single profession, and yet they do. And so that's what they were doing. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a great point. I think I'll go to PA school. So I shadowed some PAs and I liked what they were doing, and off I went.
So you're working in critical care, is that correct?
Yes.
So what's a day like? I guess short glimpse of the day like for you in critical care practice.
So I actually work nights. So it's a glimpse into a night. Yes. I work night shift. I work 7 on, so 12-hour shifts, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And then I get 14 days off, which is incredible. And the reason that I work every third weekend and a bunch of holidays. So because it's nights, it's very different than my previous kind of hospital-based jobs. I don't do any rounding. I, in addition to another PA, cross cover our pulmonary critical care service, which ends up being usually 100 patients-ish. We have 3 ICUs at our hospital, a medical ICU, a cardiac ICU, and then a very small cardiovascular surgical ICU. So we'll kind of answer patient questions for all of those people, obviously deal with any decompensations, rapid responses, and then new admissions to the pulmonary critical care service. So it ends up being a lot of fun. There's a lot of procedures, a lot of codes. It's never boring, but it's definitely changed over the last 2 years with COVID.
Oh, I was just
Before.
about to ask that. Yeah, tell us how COVID's really affected you on as far as your practice and everything.
It's been miserable.
Yeah.
There's not really any other way to say it. In the beginning of the pandemic, it was just this like horrible uncertainty that no one really knew. If staff were going to get sick, if we were going to run out of ventilators, if we were going to have enough BiPAPs. So once the kind of initial disaster, just like no one knows what we're doing, what to expect phase went by, it just became like fighting burnout and dealing with like the never ending seemingly waves of more and more cases. And now I'm currently pregnant. So that added an extra layer of like, I don't love being here,
Right.
but it's my job and it is what it is. So it's been very, very much a learning experience. And yeah, I've grown from it, but I can't say I'm happy I've gone through it either.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the pregnancy.
Thank you.
Is this your first?
It is.
Oh, congratulations. Exciting times for you on that one.
Yes.
Yeah, so you kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say new grad, but you kind of was trial by fire with being in critical care, and then right at you had been practicing what, 2 years or 3 years prior to the really COVID starting for you?
Usually right around 3 years before.
Okay. Well, at least you got that 2-year kind of learning curve under your belt a little bit, which I'm sure you're always learning in critical care.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As in all fields of medicine, but absolutely.
Well, right. So, but you've also in that time frame that you've been practicing for 5 years, been working in critical care, also, like everybody, just working all kind of hours and stressed out with taking care of COVID patients. But you've really developed your own business, or a lot of people call it the side hustle. And it's a lot of to do with finance. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually the desire to do it started really pretty shortly after I graduated, just out of my own struggle with my student loan debt. So I graduated, I went to a private PA program and I graduated with $161,000 in student loan debt, which is a little high, but a lot of people deal with similar debt burdens. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing when I took out the loans in the first
Right.
place. A lot of them were private, interest rates were 9 and 10%. And I really I had a hard time at the beginning of my profession because I felt like I wanted to like the job, but I felt so trapped financially by the job and the situation I created with the loans that I had a really hard time really even just enjoying it. So I am kind of out of my own struggles, having to figure out literally from ground zero, like how to deal with debt, how to invest, how to do all this stuff. I realized that there are a plethora of other healthcare professionals that are all in the exact same boat. And after I'd spent several years sort of clawing my way out of the hole and having some success, I realized that I could help other people, which was the beginning of this business.
That's awesome. So it took you roughly 16 months. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then another big exciting news is that after that 16 months, you're not only debt free, but our student loans paid off. You're completely debt free in a paid for home.
Yes.
That is
Yes.
huge.
Thank you.
Huge. So if we have any new grads out there listening, or you're just about to finish up PA school, or even if you finished out and been practicing for years, that is huge, and you probably hadn't figured out. And if you can come out of PA school with no loan, you're ahead of the game right there.
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
ahead of the game. I have a very similar story. Like you, I went to PA school, already had undergrad debt, and just rolled it into my PA school debt, which again, I did very similar. I went to a private school mainly because the out-of-state tuition, or the tuition at a private school versus my out-of-state tuition, wasn't really that much difference when you was talking about taking out student loans. And I, like you, graduated with if I by you calculate all, it probably was close to 175 when you calculate both undergrad and graduate student loans. And I struggled. I struggled for a long time. Of course, I didn't do like you, and after a couple of years get out of debt in 16 months. But I remember when I first was out practicing, I had basically two house payments. One house payment was my house, and the other house payment was essentially my student loans. It was actually, my student loans cost more than my house payment.
So did mine.
Yeah, and my wife and I was looking at that, and it's like we just can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
So when you were in PA school, or right before PA school, or at any time, right, did it ever dawn on you when taking out these student loans or signing the dotted line that this might be a bad idea, taking out loans?
I wish I could say yes,
Mhm.
but honestly, not really. I'm a very like goal-oriented person, and I really genuinely just put the blinders on, and I'm like, full speed ahead. I'm going to finish this program. I'm going to finish it well, and I'm going to get the job. And I really blocked out like all the financial aspects of whether or not it was a good plan, if a private program was a good plan. I really didn't care. It was just like, well, where do I have to sign to get the money? I'm going. It wasn't until honestly within a month of graduation that I even added it all up. And then I realized it maybe hadn't
Yeah.
been the best plan, and had the whole like nearly vomit in the mouth moment when I realized like, wow, I owe almost $200,000 from this.
So I'm going to ask you this: what does the term borrowed future mean to you?
That's an interesting question. I think when people say that, I feel like there's a very negative implication that you're essentially like, for example, in the case of grad school or whatever, taking out ridiculous amounts of student loans to create a future for yourself that ultimately, you may or may not ever be able to pay back, or pay back with substantial kind of harm to yourself in your future. Now, there is a point where that becomes true, but I also think acting as though everybody can get through school, especially these expensive graduate programs, without any loans is not reasonable, and is a huge barrier to most people accomplishing their dream career. Like, I could have never gone to grad school without student loans. Now, you can do it much wiser than I did, and you can really think about debt to income ratios and try to be way more intentional about it. But I think blanket statement applying that to really anybody taking out student loans isn't really fair.
Well, and I bring that up because there was a series, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, and know the series I'm talking about, that's titled by that, and it really, to me, shined the light on, if not so much graduate school like what me and you went through, because we did get a skill. I mean, we are able to get jobs that basically, like you said, can have a good salary to pay back our loans in a timely manner, especially if you're focused and diligent about it. But I think it's that time frame of when we were in undergrad, right? And so, you're taking all these student loans, you're 17 years old or 18 years old, and you have no clue what you're doing,
Right.
right? And so I thought that was interesting. So, not to, plug a bunch of different stuff, but, if those of you are about to go to, whether it's PA school or any kind of school, undergrad, whatnot, you should check out a podcast series called Borrowed Future. It would kind of at least make you think a bit. So, um, you've really, now that you've gotten out of debt and you've got your website up and your business going on, where you're coaching folks on how they can do the same and even invest. So tell us about some of your wins so far. We've talked about paying off debt. We talked about your paid for home. Um, and what are some of your new goals, and what are you doing for us financially now?
Yeah, so right now, we're really focused on growing like a very strong asset base. So we initially started on the path of like, okay, we're going to kind of do the financial independence retire early thing. And I think, we've done some soul searching, and both have sort of realized, my husband and I, that it's not necessarily that we don't want to work. We just would like to have a lot more control over what work looks like, and schedule and things like that. So our initial plan was to be able to retire at 45. And honestly, financially, we probably still would be on track to do that. Although I don't think that's really the goal anymore. At this point, we're both trying to kind of put ourselves in a situation where, again, maximal flexibility. It may involve entrepreneurship. It may involve kind of an atypical, like, you're not going to the 9 to 5 every day, maybe some, periods of like digital nomad type of life, things like that, to where, we just have options. So right now we're very focused on investing. We've invested up until this point pretty much solely in the traditional like stock market type of approach.
Right.
As of 2022, we're moving into investment real estate, which will be a whole new venture for us as well. So in the combination of those two things, we're basically trying to create financial independence. We should be there by mid 40s. And then what we'll choose to do at that point will really just be driven by kind of what our family life looks like, what passions we have, and not necessarily the need for a paycheck, which will be very different than, we're in right now.
Well, and I think you made a good point. It's not so much retire at, I mean, it sounds great, right? I'm going to retire early, retire at 45 and do nothing, right? But it's not so much, I think it's, and a lot of people get confused about that. It's not necessarily mean do nothing. It means do what you want to do and how you want to do it. And you're not tied down to, oh, well, you have to be here at 5:30 in the morning and start right now, and you don't get to leave until I tell you to. That's a big difference. So, yeah, no, I don't want to do that and don't have to. It's different. So it's not that you're not going to be necessarily practicing a PA, but maybe you find a new passion like you're doing now with your entrepreneurship, your business. Maybe you start a new business or another business. Who knows? Or as you said, maybe it's just you work when you want to while you're traveling or whatnot. So I think that's awesome. So not to getting into any age calling out or anything like that. I know that's a big no, but where I made a mistake is in my 20s, not investing anything. And I just thinking about this the other day with my wife. If I had just put in a little something, just 5%, I would probably have, and did nothing else but just put a little money away in an investment fund and just left it alone. I could have pretty much close to $1 million right now, just sitting there. And now I'm playing catch up because, and this is just my personal, example. I looked at my forecast and, unless, things just ultimately go wrong, I should be fine. But it could be a lot different.
Right.
Speak on that on your, because starting investing early and getting to where you are now, because that's ultimately, because I'm not quite where you are now, and that's like where I'd want to be, where I've got whole, real estate investments and other business investments and things to the point where basically where you got assets that are making money for you and you're not working.
Right. So I made, similar decisions. And it wasn't until, late 20s that we really started investing consistently and aggressively. So when I was younger, really my only financial knowledge came from Dave Ramsey, which I'm not speaking against Dave Ramsey. He's done incredible things for a lot of people, but his advice.
It works if you, I'm a big fan of his as well. Now, I
Yes.
can't say that I've followed his plan 100% to the T,
Yes.
but if you do, it is a plan that can work.
Right. And, we literally went on his show and did like a debt-free scream. So again,
Awesome.
nothing against Dave Ramsey, but his advice is very clear. Like you need to be completely out of debt before investing, which is great if your debt is credit card debt or your $15,000 auto loan, and is not always a great idea if your debt is, $250,000 in student loans, because you miss all of those key investing years. And like you mentioned, the 20s have incredible benefits in terms of just what compound interest and time can do for you if you get started early versus waiting until you're, late 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever. So all we did when we first started out was we did my husband's 401k match. Now, honestly, thankfully, I worked like nobody's business, paid off those loans super quickly, and started investing right away after that. But a lot of people will still, even if they're being aggressive and taking care of their loans much quicker than the traditional term, they'll still take 5, 6, 7 years. So by the time that's all said and done, gosh, you've missed a lot of compounding and a lot of potential investment returns. So I now I don't regret paying off my loans quickly, but there are a few aspects of it that I do regret. I wish we would have maxed out our Roth IRAs as we were paying off the loans, and maybe even increased the 401k contribution and done a little bit more investing along the way. It wouldn't have dramatically changed how long it took to pay off the loans. Maybe it would have been 24 months instead of 16 months or something like that. But those early 20s, man, those are the golden investing years. So if you've been fortunate enough that somebody's told you when you're young how powerful that can be, and you get started early, you can be in an incredible situation.
I fell into the trap. I wouldn't say trap, but my parents just, one parent accidentally did well just by saving when he was 18 and just putting away and never looked at it again. And then when he got ready to retire, he had all this money. And again, it's in their 18, 20 years old saving money.
Right.
But didn't really have a clue about finances. Neither did my mom. And so that never got translated over to me. It's like, yeah, pay your debts, don't write checks, keep up your checkbook, don't bounce your checks, things like that, right? Be a good citizen. But everything else, I had no knowledge on investing, no knowledge like you're talking about. And looking back now, I was like, wow, if I just would have had that information at a younger age, I might not have, because we're all young and dumb. We think we know it all. And we don't listen to our parents, our elders, but at least maybe you would have got some of that information and done one or two things right, going into. So, Yeah, I'm like you. I'm hoping some of the younger people either watching now or just hopefully someone can feed into when you see teenagers coming up, feed into them and teach them the lessons that you've learned. So that's great.
Absolutely. Yes.
So so we talked about that, your plan of not graduating, but the retirement early plan. What are some other goals or aspirations that you have?
Right now I'm fully enjoying being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's funny. Both of my parents are entrepreneurs. They both own companies. My dad's in particular has multiple employees. My mom's is a smaller company, but I grew up and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I want a regular job.
Yeah.
So I got a regular job. And then somewhere along the way, I'm like, well, I guess it's in my blood because now I'm an entrepreneur. And I've loved learning like business and even the not so fun parts, like forcing myself to learn basic accounting
Yes.
and like marketing and all these things. So right now, I'm really honestly having a lot of fun just growing myself as a person and gaining new skills through that process. I'm sure life will change for us very quickly with our first little one on the way, but that's one of the few things I'm like, yeah, that one can't go. That's really too much fun. And I feel like it's making me kind of a more well-rounded person.
Yes. So you've had a taste now being the employee. You
Yeah.
have family, your mother and father have both owned their own business, been that entrepreneur. Now you're starting your entrepreneur task, and you've been doing this business for how long now?
I started it December of 2019. So a little over 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've done it for a couple of years now. You've started, getting your kinks worked out and got your vision of where you're heading with this. It could, continue to grow, and who knows. No one kind of doing both aspects of it because, I was talking to a patient of mine the other day who owns their own business, but it's, you live or die off when you own your own business. I have another friend that owns a restaurant here locally. And right now the job market, there's jobs available, but no one's there working them. And so he went from, well, the restaurant owner went from you know managing his business to now working in the business, like really into the business now, where that's where he started to build it. And he, at this point in the stage, he was hoping to kind of step back a little bit.
Mhm.
So seeing both those aspects, where do you feel like as far as going for your continue to be more of that entrepreneur and own your own business? Or I guess give me some plus and minuses since you've done both now.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I've never done that. Like I've never been all in fully reliant on my business and
Mhm.
not had an additional paycheck, which I think takes a lot of the pressure off versus like you mentioned, if you're like live or die, got to keep the lights on, this business has to succeed type of thing. But honestly, I plan to probably err more on the side of entrepreneurship and less on the side of employee just as we move forward in life.
Right.
However, for me, a lot of that ability to take that risk, because it is a risk, comes from putting us in a good financial situation to where we're not so paycheck reliant because we have other income producing assets that allows you to do a little bit of kind of the extras and take extra chances. So in that regard, I mean, it's incredible to be your own boss. It's fun to be like the creative person and have the vision and do something, kind of make something from nothing. That part is really fun. Of course, it is hard. Like there's no one else to do the nitty gritty when it's
Right.
like a very small business. So you really kind of have to wear a lot of hats. It's not for everyone. And I don't want to like glorify entrepreneurship like it's the key to success in life, because it's not. And it's not the key to success and wealth either. I mean, you can work a traditional job and invest well and become extremely wealthy that way too. So it's really just a personal preference. But I think just for my own taste, I'll probably end up, as we become more and more financially independent, moving towards entrepreneurship. And actually, my husband really kind of wants to do the same. But, you can't just like both of you up and quit your jobs and like start businesses without having some sort of standing and income producing assets to help support you. Of course, the beginning of any business is not very profitable. So,
Well, and you got to have a plan.
right.
And so you can't just have an idea and just run with it, which you can. But I guess what I meant to say is that if you have an idea, it's a good idea. You should test it out.
Mhm.
If you want to do, you want to, see if it succeeds. Because if you never try it, you'll always wonder. But that being said, you do need to have a plan.
Yeah.
If you don't have a plan, there's no telling where you're head up. At least with a plan, even if you don't go exactly the straight arrow you thought you were going to, at least it'll be pretty close.
Right.
Um, but so yeah, that's great. I've often looked at moving towards that direction myself. What I like about it, but also realizing that there's a lot of responsibility would be on myself or whoever, is the fact that I just want the freedom to have control over my time, not knowing that I'll still have late nights and stuff working on my business, but I'm the boss.
Right.
I get to make decisions, and I don't have someone telling me what to do. And I've really, being in different organizations at this point, have seen where people have done it right and taken care of their employees, and people have done it wrong. And so I really like to see in a situation where I can take what I've learned and do it right, and when I have employees, treat them right. And so we've seen a lot of that, and there's been a lot of articles. I don't know if you read, I can't think of his last name right now. I think it's his first, or it's Harrison, something or other. But he had an article in AAPA where they talked about why PAs leave their jobs. And number one was, lifestyle change. I forget what number two, but number three in it was like hostile work environment or poor work conditions, things like that, And so I thought that was huge that actually made the top three, because most people wouldn't, you'd think they just wouldn't tell you, they just get mad and leave. So
Right. You make an interesting point, and honestly, that's sort of rampant in the world of medicine, I think.
yes.
Unfortunately, I think medicine is a field that is sort of notorious for having that type of culture. So you're right, being able to create kind of your own microculture and treat people in a specific way and set the tone is probably one of the bigger benefits of entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah. So one thing I ended up doing, kind of going back, we're talking about our student loans and stuff, and I actually promote this to anybody that'll listen, especially people that are wanting to go into PA school, prior to PA school, and even after, if they just graduated. But I was drowning in the student loan debt so bad that I even looked at this during PA school, but I actually ended up joining the military. But I joined 5 years after I was practicing. And part of it I've always wanted to. I've had a lot of family that's been in the military, mostly in the kind of National Guard setting.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I had that drive. Should have done it when I was 18, but I had other reasons why I did not. But I got married. It was right after 9/11, the height of that. And so I was getting ready to go to PA school, and was getting ready to sign up for the Navy. Looked at the Navy, looked at the Air Force, and I was getting ready to go in, and the wife was all, okay, yeah, let's do this. But then it was like right before we're getting ready, it was like, no, don't do it. I don't want you to go off. And so that went on a couple of years. We kind of went back and forth a few times with that. But then after practicing 5 years, moving to Pensacola, Florida, where there's a bunch of military families around, she learned it wasn't really that bad. And so, but it's been a great resource for me. They've been able to pay down and pay back my student loans through the programs that the military has. But, I was fortunate where I'm in now, but had I joined during PA school, man, they pay for your tuition, they pay for your books, they pay for your room and board, they give you a stipend, and you start out with time and grade. So your 2 years that you're in PA school, even though you'll owe 4 at the end, it already starts towards your retirement. And so, yeah, you can go to active duty, you could do reserves for a while, or go to active duty, then reserves. And so right now I'm on track to have, I guess, 2 separate retirements, one with the military, and then one, everything I do outside the military. And
Wow.
so, that's something that I should have done sooner,
Uh-huh.
did later, but I'm very glad I did that. And so I try to have, let people know about that and that it's not for everybody. I know that not
Sure.
everybody is cut out for it, but it's been good to me. And so I do recommend that to other
Right.
people as well as a way to pay for PA school.
Right. Well, I mean, if you have a drive or an interest, of course, like you mentioned, it's like win-win. Why
Yeah.
not? Right. So what do you do for the military now?
Well, I'm a PA. I'm in the Army Reserves, and
Okay.
so, but yeah, I'm a PA there. And so, and most of the military works the same way is they plug you where you need you.
Okay.
So I'm more of a backfill. So I don't, we do a lot of administrative stuff like on the weekends and 2 weeks out of the years and stuff like
Okay.
that. But when they need us, we may go to a hospital and backfill at a hospital. Of course, deployment overseas and in different
Sure.
places like that. But my most recent deployment, I worked both. It was kind of three roles. One day I was kind of family medicine, one day I was urgent care, and then during the urgent care, you kind of acted as a ER/urgent care. If it's bad enough to be ER, you had to manage it till you got them out. Otherwise, it's
Okay.
kind of like urgent care. So
Wow. Very interesting. So was that difficult to kind of step into that type of setting after doing orthopedics for so long, or did you feel like you were still up on all the, other medicine stuff and it wasn't difficult for you?
I think typically it would be difficult. I think what benefited me is that early on in my PA career, I was not only doing orthopedics, but moonlighting in urgent care and then transitioning for a year or so strictly in urgent care. But at this point, it had already been 2 or 3 years since I've worked in that setting. So I
Mhm.
had to re-jog my memory on that. But luckily enough, and this is where the military is that, it's everybody's in it together. And so we had two internal medicine doc and another I guess primary care provider there. And we would just, they would send all the ortho problems to me or ask me about
Sure.
ortho problems. And
Sure.
then, yeah, and rhabdo came in. I was like, all right, I know I needed to start this, but what else do I need to do with this rhabdo,
Yeah.
and things like that. So I was, or concussions and things like that. I would, things outside of my everyday ortho stuff, I would, check with them. But, foot
Gotcha.
fungus, I think everybody can treat foot fungus, right?
It's true.
Yeah.
So interesting. You mentioned that you did moonlighting in an urgent care setting. Was that like just for your clinical practice, or was that for money reasons, or why did you decide to do that?
Well, it was money reasons, but also one of my not the first orthopedic job I had, but the second one, we didn't take call like trauma call or anything. It was just office call. And
Okay.
so I did work 1 weekend a month, maybe two in the urgent care setting. And so I did that for two reasons. One, yeah, I picked up extra money and
Sure.
but also two, stay up on those skills that we learned in PA school as a general practitioner. So I wouldn't lose those skills. And that helped, but what really helped is when I was in it for that year to 2 year time frame and because I would see such a wide variety of patients come through and how to remember all my cardiac meds and of course, how to treat blood pressure and then diabetes. Diabetes ones that's just not my favorite to treat, and luckily I wouldn't always have to treat it, but you'd have enough, you'd have to refill their meds because they couldn't get in to see the primary or things like that. And I know we don't typically do that in urgent care, but what are you going to do? Let them not have their diabetic medications for 2 weeks?
Right.
Yeah, you're not going to do that. So,
Interesting. So I did a lot of moonlighting early on as well,
mhm.
but that's how I paid off my loans. So I paid, if you do the math, like about $10,000 a month, which is much more than any PA's take home salary.
Yeah,
So I did that by moonlighting, and I get asked a lot if that was like a negative or how that affected my career. If I was burnt out, those kind of things. And so I always ask when people say like, oh, I picked up a little extra here or there, which of course a little extra varies tremendously depending on who's saying it.
right.
But, it's a common question that I get. I worked a ton of extra jobs, doing mostly hospital medicine stuff, but I felt like it was a huge, huge benefit to my career. Ultimately, I felt like I got to see a lot, learn a lot, experience, the more you're in medicine, like you said, the more you see, the more broad things you see, the more you learn. And between that and networking, I felt like it really put me on a good footing. So I was just curious kind of what your experience had been.
At that point, very similar. I probably would have considered doing other things too. It was just that was an opportunity I had, and I took it within the hospital system I was working in. Yeah, and I know on your website you have like a little, I guess, how-to guide on the per diem work and stuff like that. So, but yeah, for me. That's what it was. But now there's no way I would, right now between the military and then any on call that I have now with the practicing, I wouldn't pick up anything extra right now. But I'm curious, what would be some tips you give and recommendations for other PAs looking to do that kind of per diem type work, things like that?
Yeah, one of the major things is to, in general, stick with something that's either you're well prepared for out of PA school, which is typically like family practice, urgent care type of setting, or is what you're already doing clinically, because it's very difficult to pick up a per diem in a different type of field. Somebody that is hiring a per diem employee wants someone that's functional right out of the gate. Of course, they're willing to give you the icing, so to speak, but no one has time to give you the cake. So sticking with things that you sort of know you can walk into and reasonably expect to succeed is important. And then one of the other big mistakes that I made was I lucked out that these per diems that I got had tail insurance, but I did
Yes.
not look. I didn't know to look. It was like the very beginning of my profession. So that is a huge thing, is making sure your medical malpractice coverage with tail insurance is in place if you're going to take per diem work. Otherwise, it's absolutely not worth the money. So
Yeah, I got burnt on that, not so much from a per diem standpoint, but my first job when I left and they said, "Oh, by the way, you got to get your own tail." And I'm like, "What?" And
expensive.
tail insurance for specialty, especially surgical specialty, is
Mhm.
super expensive, super expensive. So, anybody out there that hasn't dealt with this yet, take that information
Yeah.
and use it wisely.
Take notes. Yeah. It's something you can want to avoid, but live and learn. I was trying to
Right,
make more money, so I just jumped right in and learned some lessons along the way.
right. I tell you that was a big learning experience for me there. But what we was telling when I was doing a little stint of academia, what I'd tell our students is like, do not take like a locums job right out of school. And that's one thing. One time we had I guess a locums recruiter that wanted to come talk to our students, and
Mhm.
for a while I was like, oh, okay, but then I was like, when they first said, no, that's a bad idea, because if anyone,
Yeah.
and I think we had to allow them to do it because we already agreed to do them. But after that, I don't think we allow that happen anymore at that university, because it's just such a bad idea for a new grad. A bad idea. I mean, it's just, you
Right.
can like you said, you can get yourself in trouble if you don't have enough experience to say, hey, this isn't right.
Right.
I don't need to be doing this.
Right. Absolutely. And honestly, I feel like the first year in particular, even more as a new grad, having excellent mentorship is really what makes or breaks your
Yeah.
profession. So being in the same location, having an outstanding mentor, having people who are invested in seeing you grow. I mean, that's huge for your longevity as a PA in general. So by taking just a locums job out of the gate and you're like skipping all of that, I think you're really missing a lot of professional development.
Yeah, I would 100% agree in that. 100% agree. So so you have a website. What's your website for people to go to and check it out?
It is www.strivewithkristen.com.
Yeah. So I encourage everybody to go out there and check out her website. She's got a lot of great information and resources there for you. There are some, paid prescription, but there's worth it, it's for that information that you may not have gotten anywhere else. And it's all packaged there, easy to, together, easy to read, and it's all in one place. Like a lot of things, yeah, you can get this information, but here Kristen's packaged it all up for you and kind of somewhat giving you a step-by-step guide on a plan on how to do things and what's worked for her and things like that. So yeah, and you have Instagram handle. What's your Instagram handle?
It is also at Strive with Kristen.
Okay, and then Facebook's the same, correct?
Facebook is the same. Now, I will say I'm mostly on Instagram. So I try to be really engaged on Instagram. I try to answer all the direct messages that I get. I might be a little slow, but if you have a question or you just want to kind of throw something around or toss something out, that's probably the easiest way. My email is on my website, and I do respond to all those as well. But if you hop on Instagram, I try to get on there every single day and stay in touch. So.
Perfect. Perfect. All righty. Well, Kristin, thanks for joining us. And, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me. This was a great conversation. Really appreciate what you're doing for the PA community.